Okay, and welcome. What is this? Tech Simplified Live. And today we're talking about limiters. We're talking about waveforms, limiters, peaks, things like that, and visual views and things like that. So, hi, Larry. Welcome. Thanks for the comment there. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Let me look at my little meters here. So I have meters that show me the sound. I just reconfigured a bunch of things. I did one earlier today and reconfigured my connection to YouTube. So hopefully you can see me, you can hear me, that the stream is clear. Let me just check this other one here. And right now, okay, it says I have an excellent connection. Well, it's always interesting. So let me know if you're seeing things and hearing things well. So appreciate you being there. So Stream Health says right now I have an excellent connection, and so we'll see. Anyway, so if you ever see a glitch, throw a comment in there. I have just crazy amounts of bandwidth here, where I have a 2 gigabyte hardwired connection back to my to a fiber connection. I'm symmetrical, 2 gigs up, 2 gigs down. So in theory, this should be hyper stable and work. So throw comments in there. Oh, sound is great. All right, thanks, Ben. All right, let me see. Oh, yep, and it's showing up there, Ben. I appreciate that. Okay, super helpful. Now you're hearing it on Facebook. So if you're on YouTube, and ultimately, by the way, it's both on Facebook and YouTube. It's being simulcast at the same time, and so one stream, the streams might change. Will be good in one place, not in the other. These are all cataloged and they're in a playlist on YouTube. It's easier to find things later. So someone, maybe today you don't need this and you're doing it, you're getting an overview, and then 6 months from now you want to refer to something, go to YouTube. It's easier to search. There's a playlist there for everything related to this Tech Simplified. There's one for Studio One. There's one for RX. There's just a bunch of playlists there, which just makes it easier to search, makes it easier to find. So check that out. Appreciate your comments though, and so if something changes, let me know. Okay. So here's what's going on. We look at this waveform, and it looks like we're clipping, or we've squashed it all. And one of the things that comes up is when people are looking at waveforms, sometimes they take them literally, like this is my audio is squashed. And now, depending on how I zoom in, you'll notice that the display changes here on this track. So that, let me change the colors so that we can talk about them easier. I'll make this one, I don't know, that's yellow-orange. The yellow-orange track there looks totally squished and squashed and all. But what's really happened there is I did bring it down more than I would normally. But what I want you to make sure that you're aware of is, even though this one has been squashed, depends on the quality of the limiter. Some limiters can do a lot of bringing things down, and it is different than clipping. This looks like it could have been clipped, but clipping is when it goes above 0 and it actually literally chops off the ends, and it definitely looks different. But here's something interesting. As I change the display and zoom out, then all of a sudden you'll notice, oh, that is not really, there's some variety there. It's not as squished and squashed as it looks originally. So some of it has to do with the zoom level. And as I zoom in more and more, you start seeing, wait a minute, that's just a normal waveform. When I'm down to the second level, seconds, where you're seeing every second rather than trying to compact it all. So just note, it can be deceiving. Same thing, I'm looking at an Audacity thing. I took this and just went ahead and put a limiter on in Audacity and set it down to I think I set that to -5. And it was the same signal, by the way. It was I took a wave file, a wave copy of this track right here, this and took this, started this, and then threw it in Audacity, just so you could see it has to do with the display. Now, normally, by the way, I do all this stuff through keyboard shortcuts, but just so you see, as I zoom in more, so you can see what I'm doing. I tend to use the menus while I'm doing these demos, not because I want to, it just takes too long to do this manually, but I think it's a good thing so that you know what I'm doing. But as you zoom out enough, then you see the same exact effect no matter what you're looking at, whether it's this one or I take this one and do the same thing and throw it in here. Um, every time you take and apply a limiter, you can chop some stuff off, and it looks flat top and that looks clipped. And this is true of all DAWs. It wouldn't matter whether I'm in Pro Tools or Audacity or Studio One or Reaper. It looks visually like I've chopped everything off here. And if I don't know how long this is, like this is 2 minutes of audio, but imagine if I had 2 hours of audio. So if I do that here, I'm going to take this, let me take this one right, I'll just do this one. And I'm going to press my D key a few times, and now I have roughly, there's 50 minutes, and I'll duplicate it one more time, and I have this now, and let me just bounce this whole track so that it's all one thing, so you don't see all the dividing. But I just duplicated the same 2 minutes. Now I have a couple hours of it, and look at that. Look how, if I'm looking at a couple hours of audio all at once, it does appear as if it's all chopped off there. It's really not. As I zoom in, you see that there's not. It's just not. But the visuals, if I don't have context, right now I have approximately 15 seconds across here, 20 seconds. It's about 20 seconds from side to side. And that is not all lopped off at all. But if I look at it this way, if you saw my audio and didn't realize that this is an hour and a half, then it appears like, wow, bozo, Don here just cut that all off. So let me undo some of that stuff. I'll get rid of a bunch of it, and we'll go back to the original display. What I want you to be sure you know is everyone. So this whole thing started because last week someone posted something that looked totally funny. Look at this one at the top. If I compact it, make the track really small, I can zoom in visually here, but I make that track small, and then I go ahead and zoom in, even it starts to look kind of cut off. It's really hard to tell here. Let me duplicate that a few times here. So DDD, all right. So I've just duplicated it. But you can see at first it looks like that's all cut off. And it's not cut off. If I zoom in on any of this, you'll see it's not. There it is. If I'm seeing, what do I have there? I have 20 seconds across there. Zoom back out. So I have 20 seconds from side to side-ish. And when I do that, it looks fairly normal. And then if I make it the track bigger, what you find out is, oh, okay. Yes, this one, because I had set it up to do something specific, meaning I had set it up. Let me do undo. I had set it up. Oh, I've got 30 minutes of audio there. Let's just take all this stuff and delete it. All right. So now I have, I don't know, 2 minutes of audio. And when you see 2 minutes of audio, it's totally different than if you see it compacted down here and I was seeing a minute and a half. So first thing, just looking at the visuals of audio, is if you don't have a timeline to know how much, it's hard to tell, and things can be deceivingly cut off because displays need to show a bunch of data, and if it's showing 2 minutes in the space of a half an inch or an inch, then it has to abbreviate things, and it just makes them look funny. So a lot of them can look funny depending on how much they are zoomed in, zoomed out. And at the same time, then you see that this down here looks totally messed up if I zoom in, where you start thinking, wow, that's really terrible. So we're going to talk about limiters. And I will check and see what kind of questions come in. And, oh, John, thanks. Feels good so far. Oh, feed good so far. I think he said feels good so far. Thanks, John. I did reconfigure some things. I went and reset the amount of bandwidth that goes out, and I like doubled it. So in theory, should not have had a problem, but this morning I was having a problem. So, hey, who knows? And as a matter of fact, and even worse, when I did it this morning, I only had one feed going to YouTube. I did not have a feed also simultaneously going to Facebook. But right now, I'm feeding Facebook and I'm feeding YouTube Live. And right now, I'm getting an excellent stream. But I can't tell. I'm still trying to figure out something on my machine, something on the Wave, something through my ISP, whatever. Anyway, I pay a bunch of money to have good connectivity, and I still have problems. And you might have problems someday too, because there's so many moving parts in there. And my wife was having a hard time getting to email last night, and it would work in Firefox. It wasn't working in off of Chrome, and that's a tech thing that comes up every once in a while. Email won't work properly. We could get it to work in an incognito window, but it wouldn't work in a regular window. And then today it's all working fine, meaning it wasn't our machines. It was working fine in some configurations, not others. But you know what? That's the life in the tech world that's really annoying, is that something works fine one day and it doesn't work another day. And sometimes it is your machine. That's our first assumption, is always, it's got to be us. And then sometimes we find out, wait a minute, it wasn't us at all in this case. All right, a lot of moving parts, but it's fun here. So the question is, what happens if I take this whole signal here and I'm going to extreme, let me go to extremes. I'm going to do it this other way. I'm going to go find a limiter. I'm going to take this little limiter here, right here, and I'll drag it up here, and I'm going to add it, and then I'm going to do something where I'm just going to apply it in context here. So this I just went ahead and let's see, did I do that right? That does not look at all right to me. What did I do wrong there? Oh, let me hold on. I know what I did wrong, by the way. It's kind of funny. Sometimes, oh, by the way, how do I know what I'm doing wrong? I've messed it up before, okay? I didn't change the ceiling to do anything. I'm going to do this, and that's, let me go extreme here. So the question is, how much limit? So what's a limiter going to do? A limiter is going to take and look at these peaks that are going up above a certain level, and it's going to bring them down. Now, some people think it just chops them off. No. A good limiter, instead of chopping it off, does a different thing. It goes ahead and it turns something down in milliseconds, and then after the audio event has gone by, it turns it back up. And so it happens so quickly. And when done well with a good quality limiter, people won't know that it's been turned down temporarily. It's all so quick. The machines can do it amazingly quick. And if I do this, just so you see, we'll go ahead and render that out, and it should just lop all right, there we go. So see, it brought that down. Now, here's one of the things that's not obvious. It's that depending on the quality of the limiter, it will determine how much you can limit something before it has some distortion. Now, see, this looks like it just gave it a haircut. Looks like a little fence post there. It's just perfectly cut off there. See how it looks that way? But watch this. We go ahead and we zoom in on it. And as we zoom in, first, this looks like a perfect haircut here, right here at this point. But as you go and you zoom in, you start noticing, oh, there's some variability there. And by the way, if I wanted, I could pull up another editor that shows the level that it was brought down to, and that's going to be, it's showing here on the side. I don't ever use this, but I have a display that gives me those numbers if I absolutely want them. But look at how cut off it looks, and that has to do with the zoom level of this specific display. So I zoom to a different level. I take these here that look flat top. Let me take these right here, flat top, right? Let me highlight it, flat top, okay? And as you zoom in, when you zoom in, you start realizing, oh, those are not all, they're not cut off. If I really zoom in and continue to zoom in, you'll see this looks, that's at the level that it's getting, that is unperceivable. And I don't even know if this display at that level, because it has only certain resolution, it doesn't show everything. And so people get wigged out occasionally when they look at a display zoomed in at the absolute top level. It's still not distorted when we end up with the limiter running that hard. Okay, so here's the big takeaway for you. If you're gonna, first off, let's assume you recorded all the way to the max. Let me undo this. I'm gonna restore that. And I'm going to let's see, I could normalize it. I'm just going to visually bring it up. By the way, there's some headroom in here. Watch this. I'm going to go up too far. And so now, what's going on there? That looks like that's cut off too. And then I'm going to take my limiter here. I should just go here, and I'm going to set it at -3. pick a number. I put minus 3.06, and we're good on that, and we render that out. And even though I had flat topped it, so now it brought everything down, looks like it flat tops. And then when you go look and you zoom in more, you see some variability among all this stuff. And all I'm going to tell you is this: when you have a good quality limiter, going down 3 to 5 dB is just not a big deal. And since if somebody's doing audiobooks, then we're going to be going, say, to definitely minus 3, minus 3.5 is really where I go to for all my WAV files, since the standard to submit is minus 3. So minus 3.5 is quieter, and because we have the stupid negative number stuff, and that works great. It means that at a max, the most any signal is going to be brought down, if it was all the way to 0, is going to be brought down 3.5 dB, which for a great quality limiter is, I don't want to say it's nothing, but it is functionally a non-issue, because it absolutely is transparent. When people listen back to that, they will not hear any distortion. It is not being cut off. It is just being brought down, and it works great. So don't let anybody tell you, I mean, look at this display. Look how flat top that looks right there. I'll zoom in on that so you can see. It looks like I have totally wrecked that audio. Look at that. And you'll have people that say, well, you've clipped this. Not at all. It has not been clipped at all. It has been limited, and with a good limiter, coming down a few dB, 3 dB, a good limiter will go 10 dB without any problem on most signals. Now, some of it does have to do with the nature of the signal. There's some nuance in there. When I'm recording music, it has to be, well, what instrument am I using or listening to? And there's because I have all sorts of harmonics that are occurring in there, and there's a bunch of issues there. One of the things that is not well known in voice is if I were clipping a slight bit, because the duration of clipping ends up in the real world being so small. So pretend I output this and I clipped it right at 0, or pick a number. If I output it right at 0 and these were going over, so it did lop it off on the export, then what would happen is the duration of these signals is so tiny that this lop off part, nobody would hear the distortion, as long as it only occurred a few times. Like this just isn't very much where it's occurring. It's such a small portion. If I have a sustained instrument, if I had a piano note, if I had a trumpet that was sustaining a note, these peaks would be so close together, then you have a chance to start hearing it if it's occurring too often. Okay, so we're not talking about music recording. So every once in a while, I'll have one of my engineering friends give me grief because I'm talking about voiceover, but I've just listened to thousands. I did music when I was a young guy, and so yeah, you're very careful not to clip if you can. And sometimes you want that effect for some musical instruments, but a different discussion. You do not have to worry about coming down a couple dB. 3 dB is the most that will happen in any audiobook. Now, if I'm delivering audio for let's say I'm delivering audio for a voiceover, I don't need to go to minus 3 for a voiceover. I need to be at minus about, I'll tell you exactly what I do. I'm right here at minus 1.17 is a lot of times what I use. I always use some weirdo odd number there. Okay, let me zoom in on that so you can see that. There it is, 1.17. That's my ceiling there, okay? So I'm going to take this whole thing, and I'll just tell you what. If I were going all the way up to 0 there, and I bring it down, so that, let me get this back to, that's about right, okay? That's right there. We're starting off at a level where I'm just barely touching 0 if I don't do anything. You can see a little peak right there. Zoom in on that. And you can see a little tiny peak there. And that's just getting really close to 0. And then I run this limiter. And what's going to happen is once I render that limiter out, then it just brought it down now to minus 1. And you can see the same little peak. Let me just show it right here. Zoom in. And when you look at that, oh no, I've cut that off. Terrible person I am. Yes, I am. And then when you go and you drill down and you realize, wait a minute, it was just one spot where it actually, and as you drill in further and further and further, you end up seeing that it didn't lop it off. Okay, there it looks like it did. And also, there is a, the since my samples are at 44,000 times per second, 44,000 times per second. This resolution does not go down to where on the screen I can see every sample, simply because it is an overwhelming amount of data for people to see. And it's just, there's no reason to have that kind of resolution, and they don't. This thing goes down to the thousandths of a second in terms of the actual between from here to here is a thousandth of a second, okay? But there are more samples in between these two areas here than there are little tick marks. This is, so you can even see the little stair steps in here are, I'm down to the thousandths of a second and there are more stair steps. So just be careful. The waveform is not the audio. It's a visual representation of the audio, and then they have to make compromises when you get into this crazy thing where if you had 44.1, then you've got 44,000 per second. You'd need screens that are a mile wide in order to see every sample at any kind of resolution that makes any kind of sense. And yeah, skip it. Okay, I'm running fairly high res here, and it still can't do it all. And it doesn't even try. Once you get down below a thousandth of a second, there are markers in between that, but it still kind of gets into a ridiculous range. All right, let me look for questions. Dun, 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 dun. I was just advised. Oh, let me see what Dave says here. And let me highlight it as well. Oh, let me get my little display up here. Where did I put that? That is going to be right here. And then, so now Dave just asked a question. All right. I just advised the guy about his audio for meditation app processing. Can you speak to any special consideration for that type of processing? Well, I'm curious what you advised the guy, or he was advising you. So by the way, so on a meditation app, first thing, most of the time when people record that, what they do is they have a tendency to record it super quiet. They'll tend to do something like this. Okay, I'll zoom in on that. They're recording really quiet. That's just the way people tend to do it. Let me go back. Turn up. All right. That isn't always the case, but that is often the case, that they're talking very, I'm going to move into my mic here. They're talking very intimately and nobody can hear them. And so if that's the case, they're going to start off with a very low signal. And what I tell them is, hey, you know what? It's okay to record that meditation up louder. We still have the same considerations that if you're doing meditation, by the way, you better have a good compressor on that, because when they start off, they're talking very quiet. Some of those sections are almost inaudible when you start off with no signal there. And if you don't, you're going to need to amplify it, and you're going to need to use a compressor. Why? A compressor is going to even out some of that, and it is going to, one, make it taller. Let me go ahead and put a compressor on there. So if I take this thing, I already have one, but let me put it over here. Let me just put it on the event. Let me summarize it for you. You're going to want a compressor because a compressor brings up the quiet parts and brings down the loud parts, and you're going to need to amplify it so it's loud enough that people can hear it. Meditation almost always, not always, but almost always has some sort of background that is occurring as well. Either it's extremely light music or some sort of background like a brook or water in the background or something like that. So you do need to get it above that. It has to be turned up and it has to be compressed almost in virtually every case, but I'd advise that anyway for any voiceover. But definitely a great quality compressor is going to help a lot. And then you're going to limit it because there are going to be some peaks in that, even though visually initially you won't have any peaks, but you're going to have to amplify that in order to get it to a level that the real world can hear it. It still can be quiet. It does not have to be at the same level as what we do for audiobooks, but it's going to be loud enough that you can hear it, and understand that people will turn it up to where they can hear it. So you need to deal with a compressor and a limiter at a minimum, and some gain in there, or it's not going to be heard. And then you can even see this is normal. This little section here is a little quieter than the sections around it. And after I put a compressor in there, it will go ahead and bring that up, and it'll do a subtle thing. It'll bring down the peaks before and after a little bit, and it'll bring this up a little bit. And even though it's evened out, it's not change. You can still get the same emotional effect. Don't get wigged out. But if you have a good compressor, then it'll still have the dynamics that somebody put into it when they were whispering it as well. So compressor, you can have gain, compressor, limiter. It's just a matter of how much you have, and it depends on your starting signal and how they recorded it. Okay, Dave. So I mean, I can give you some answers on that, but it's not. Maybe you told him to go to George. It depends on what DAW he's using, and George can do the same thing I would do. It's going to and it depends on what DAW he's using as to which exact tools, but same thing. They are going to end up with some compression and some limiting on it, and it's the same as we use for every other thing. There's really nothing special about it, other than I see over and over and over again that people that are recording that stuff have a tendency to do this. They're also going to need some other things. Chances are their noise level, because they're going to be starting, but it would depend on their original audio. Did they record it at a decent level, or did they record it as a whisper-ish, somewhere, a really intimate, close mic type thing? Their noise level is going to come up, and if they don't have RX, when people are listening to it at a normal volume, this right here is going to be fairly loud, depending on what they're doing, what tools they're using. But they'll want to denoise the background as they bring that up, or record at a reasonable level before they start. So it depends on whether you're starting. You can advise them before they record or after they record. What's the ratio there? But I guarantee they're going to be better off if they have some sort of denoising happening as well. RX has great tools for doing that stuff. So if you don't have RX, or they don't have RX, tell them to get RX. That will make things even easier. He's a total noob. Okay, well, first thing is have them record it right. And that's yeah. It's like, isn't that a bit like going to Whole Foods and telling the cashier to shop at Trader Joe's? Maybe. By the way, some of it also, if they're brand new, then what you really want to do, and they're going to be doing that, then tell them to get good tools, because if they have the good tools, then life is simple. Okay? I mean, that's absolutely, because what I'd be telling them, I would totally cheat it. I'd be telling them, hey, I got a template. If they start off with my voiceover template, and it has everything set up, and then if they record here and then they export, it's going to handle, because the tools are already built in. Okay, I've got that all done on templates, so that somebody doesn't have to worry about that stuff. If people get the right tools, a lot of this stuff is just easier. If I'm going to cook and I have a convection oven, if I have an air fryer, if I have an Instapot, if I have a waffle iron, if I'm going to make waffles, if I have good tools, if I have a food processor, if I'm going to make hummus or guacamole, you can do all that stuff by hand. And then if they have good tools, then life is easy. And yeah, it really makes sense to get the most, the better tools. And then let me see what else you're saying there. Not only effect stack, I have it all set up. It's not only do I have an effect stack, but I mean, it's already built into all my templates that I have for people. So I give them templates that have the effects built in, whether they're doing audiobooks, whether they're doing, and then I've built effect stacks for years. Okay. Anybody but really, here's a little bonus. I have people go to different engineers, and they go to an engineer that doesn't work with that the effects are the same across all the tools. Okay. But that would be, if I'm a mechanic and I work on Mercedes for a living, and then you bring me a Toyota, I know the principles that apply to Toyota. And is there any difference in putting brakes on a Toyota, putting them on a Mercedes? The principles are all the same for disc brakes, but the details, so it depends on what you're really asking me to do. There are details, and I see it all the time. People use one, just because an engineer knows, like me, knows how to do something, and you ask me about SoundForge, I have to go look at those tools because I used SoundForge a long time ago, but it's not something that I would actually deal with today because I don't use those tools. I know I know when I look at the compressor, I know what the settings say, but you have to listen to it as well. And one of the kind of minor issues in this whole business is there's plenty of us out here who know the numbers, but don't have the ears to evaluate whether, yeah, the details, there are multiple settings in there that you can tweak. And there are some tools that anybody could use and everybody will get right. When you get into RX, you have that all the time when you're doing denoising. And then, but it's not the same as taking somebody who's a specialist and really knows RX real well. That's one gonna give you one answer. And then you have a bunch of people that, yeah, I know denoisers because I've used them, and they don't know a specific tool set intimately. So then they recommend the same thing to people, and it's kind of funny how that works. So anyway, yeah, my and people start in Audacity, and then they stick in Audacity unless they're doing something. Um, it is kind of funny. They start with Audacity because it's free. The better tools are $100 or so, and really they get better results. It takes less work because they're template based. Once you have a template, you don't have to think about this stuff. So yeah, that's the thing going on there. And then I mean, he's in Audacity now because he may not know any better. Okay, and it's quote free. He's still probably going to buy a mic or an interface. So for the price of those, he can end up with a better tool because every Focusrite, you get a free copy of I can't remember what they're giving away these days, but it's not Audacity. The Presonus gives away Studio One with their interfaces, with some of their mics. So you have a situation where the guy's going to buy a mic at some point, and if he buys a mic, then he could get an interface with it. If he buys the right mics, if he buys the right interfaces, yeah. So. And the question is what he's going to do. If he's a hobbyist, then that's one thing. If he wants it to be pro and sell a lot, that's a whole other. And if he's not ready for RX, well, that's fine. But a lot of times, if he gets his audio up to the level that it needs to be, then he's going to need some denoising. And so if he doesn't use RX, that's fine. But so it's a matter of whether yeah. If you're talking about someone that's going to be a hobbyist and not try to sell stuff to a lot of people, or they're not going to publishers, or they don't have clients that they're selling it to who are buying a voiceover from somebody, you can get away with anything. I can cook things. I can cook hamburgers, and everyone will think they're great. But if I try to sell them to a bunch of people, then people are like, you use too much salt. You don't use enough salt. You're using cheap buns. But hey, they're good enough for me. Then that's one thing. Versus if I'm going to sell them to a bunch of people, then it's like, well, how does yours compare to somebody else's, and that kind of thing. So it does depend on who he's selling to, and that's cool too. Okay, so we'll talk about things that you need for your stuff, assuming you're selling your voiceovers to clients who are discerning. That's one thing. And then what I really want is all my audio to go out. And even if the client I have is not discerning, that they don't have good ears, that they don't really know it, all they know is they go, wow, Dave's stuff sounds great. And they come back to you to buy something else. If you do an audiobook, Dave's audiobook sounds fantastic. And then other people can hear it and go, I don't know why Dave sounds better than Don. I just know he does. They don't need to know why. If you're using better tools than me, then at least from that point of view, you can be more competitive. Now, that assumes we were both pretty good actors, okay? So that's the bigger factor. And what happens these days is so many people are in this business that today, to be competitive, you definitely, acting, performance is first. I'm a performer first. I play music for a living. That's the first thing. The feel that you have in your performance is number one. Then secondarily, hey, if you have good technique and you have all the tools behind it so that you can do it faster, you can do it with less effort, that allows you to be that much better. And when they have a tie where they go, Don's not very good, and then I have pretended I had a brother Dan, and so I don't know, do I want Don or I want Dan? I want the tiebreaker to be, well, my stuff sounds better than his in terms of they don't have distractions and background noise and mouth noise, and especially if they do meditation, there's definitely some mouth noise that's going to come into that because it's recorded so quiet by most people, and then it's brought up because people have to hear it. And yeah, it becomes an issue that now if they're listening to somebody for hours, then it's one thing if he's just doing it for himself. If he's going to sell it and he wants to have big sales on it, then he'll invest in some tools. So that's kind of the way that goes. All right. So what you really want to do here is make sure that when you see the displays, don't get fooled, or make sure that you have perspective on how zoomed in something is, because you can see that looks totally destroyed, but yet that will sound great. This one up here, I have the same thing where if I zoom in enough, it also looks destroyed. I mean, I'd have to, right now you can't see that, but if I duplicate it, because it's just so short, so let me duplicate it, of course, and then make it all one. So now that looks like it's really messed up, right? Everyone would look at that and kind of go, wow. So that's 30 minutes of audio zoomed in there, and it does look like I have totally given it a haircut, and it's awful, and it's too limited, it's too compressed, it's too something. It might be, but it might not be. That's just a visual thing based on how. So I do want the perspective, and as I zoom out, you'll start going, oh, yeah, that's fine. Look at that right there. Take that right there, zoom in, and you'll go, that's no big deal. It's not just one thing. I zoom out. So zoom levels matter. Get a good limiter. Note, like everything else in life, good tools make your life easy. The better tools, and people won't, most people will not hear the difference between a good limiter and a bad limiter to save their life. But most people wouldn't know good chocolate, good steak, good wine, good coffee. Pick your thing that you're particular about. If you like a certain candy, I like. My dad was into red licorice, and over time, there's a big difference. I do like Twizzlers just because it reminds me of being a kid. But if I want good licorice, my favorite licorice is from New Zealand or Australia, and I don't know why. I don't know what they do better or different, but there's two manufacturers out there, and so if I want some really good licorice, very often there's a couple brands that I really like. I'm not trying to promote licorice here. I'm just as an example. So there's the generic licorice that every once in a while, when I was younger, first off, I try not to, I don't buy these things anymore because I just sit and eat them all at once. Those big jars, they're like massive plastic circular things filled with Twizzlers or some sort of that licorice, the red licorice that you can get. You're having a party at work in the old days when you went to work, and you had 30 people there. One of the things on the table would probably be this thing of licorice, and it'd have all these licorice things. I mean, that stuff's okay, but it's nothing like the licorice when you buy specialty licorice. And pick your food. Pick your thing that you like. If you like steak, if you like lobster, you could have bad steak. We've all had that sometimes. It's like, oh, it's not well cooked. It's not well seasoned. It's not aged properly. And you can have amazing. I'm into, today I eat healthier than I used to. So the difference between good spinach that's fresh, and when I was a kid, we had the only thing we had was frozen spinach, frozen bird's eye spinach. If any of you are not age challenged, you might remember that. And frozen bird's eye spinach is awful. So I thought spinach was terrible when I was a young guy. And then as I matured and moved out to California, and then I started having fresh spinach and good salad, you go, hey, spinach can be pretty good, and it's the same thing. Spinach can be terrible depending on how it's grown, packaged, shipped, how fresh it is, or it can be pretty darn good. And that doesn't mean you may or may not like spinach, so pick your food. Same thing. The details matter in food, the details matter in DAWs, the details matter in the tools, down to some limiters sound harsh because they don't make the decisions that the developers made mathematically are different, and it's especially true when you get into compressors. All right, I'm gonna look for any other questions. I never forget Popeye. Oh yes. So I never forget Popeye. Uh, Spinach did not taste good, and especially back in the day. I mean, I just never. But there was a bunch of vegetables: broccoli, spinach. There's another one. What are the little round things? I can't think of their names right now. But I just thought all vegetables like that were awful because the only experience I had in Michigan back in the day were the frozen stuff where it was in a block of ice, basically. It was frozen. Where today, heck, the frozen stuff's better. The frozen stuff is more nutrition and better taste. Like if you get blueberries now, they got a little truck sitting out on the field, and they pick that stuff, and within an hour of it being picked, it's already flash frozen individual. I mean, the technology is amazing, so you can get frozen stuff now that's just great. But I didn't have any. I wouldn't have known that. And it's the same with the tools that we use. The better ones make your life easier, and they do a better job, and you get more nutrition out of your audio by using better tools, just like you do with the other stuff there. Yeah, and spinach, Larry, yeah. I mean, I hated, I never thought spinach was any good. If you had told me I'd eat spinach, as an adult where I have the choice, no one can make me eat spinach, I guess, I would have bet against it, all right? So, all right. If you have a subject, one of the things I'm going to talk about, there was something that came up in one of the groups. Microphone stands. There are so many choices in microphone things that next week I'm going to talk about microphones and microphone stands in particular, in that there are so many choices, and it makes a difference which ones you use. And then some things I see about the way people use their microphone stands that they don't work for very long and they get wrecked. And there's some simple things you can do to have them work much, much better. But I'll talk about desk stands versus clamp-on stands versus floor stands and some of the details there because, man, it's amazing. And then, of course, if you have a question, artichokes are another one. Yeah, artichokes, man. I never would have thought those were any good. Never. Liver, I hated liver. I'd never had fresh liver. I've never had, anyway, how you cook it makes a difference. How it was prepared, and how it was actually stored, whether it's fresh, whether it's not, all those little details. But everyone has their food that when we grew up, we thought it was terrible. And as an adult, you discovered, whoa, hey, this stuff can be really good based on some other factors that just weren't available when I was a kid. And most of you experienced that. Just know, when we're working audio, we have the same thing. There's a lot of variety out there. And while at first it looks like, oh, they're all the same, they ain't. Okay? First dropout. Okay, but let me see. Let me look at their dropouts can be, so far, my stream is showing that I don't have anything that there's a problem on my end now. Now, there's still going to be dropouts because there's a lot of moving parts between me and the internet, and me and you to your ISP to the Google servers, the Facebook servers, depending on where you're watching it there. Okay, so you guys, I don't see any other questions, but if you have something that you want me to talk about in the sessions here, be sure to get me you can either send me a direct message, you can post in the video Tech Simplified. If you're on YouTube and you don't know that there's a Facebook group with 3,000 people talking about voiceover tech 7 days a week, be sure to join that Facebook group. Subscribe to this channel. Share this with other people if it's helpful. Let me know how I can assist. And so I got to get one last question here where we're looking at. Let me go right here. My dog enjoyed liver. Yes. That was me too, because My mom would make it every so often, and because she liked it, and yeah, I'd give it to the dog. I'd give it to the cat. I never ate it. I thought it was horrible stuff. And then as an adult, I really like it these days. But we buy organic, we buy good stuff, and we have availability around us of some really good quality stuff. And then, of course, how you cook it matters, how you season it matters. But that's true across all these foods. Chocolate, man, good dark chocolate. I hated all chocolate until I really didn't even like milk chocolate that much, although it's sweet enough. Yeah, every once in a while, Snickers bar will work. But today, I'm kind of a snob about chocolate. I really like great quality chocolate, and there's a big difference between the good ones and the bad ones. So, anyway, be sure to send me questions, things that you want me to talk about here. We're always talking about audio, and of course, join us in the group. And I hope you have a fantastic day. And as always, join me next week for the Heller Baarns Ask Me Anything, which is primarily audiobook focused with some tech. This is all about tech. We'll see you next week. Have a great one. Bye bye.